what inner child actually means, what inner child work is, how it works, how to do it. I want to totally lay that out on the table because it's probably been one of the most profound tools that I have used in my healing journey. Hello, welcome into another episode. I thought it was only fitting for this episode to be about the inner child because the last two episodes were about our relationship to our mother and our relationship to our father, and now it makes sense to explore what inner child actually means, what inner child work is, how it works, how to do it. I want to totally lay that out on the table because it's probably been one of the most profound tools that I have used in my healing journey to becoming more secure, to breaking through different self-sabotage behaviors, limiting beliefs. So much of it comes back to this inner child work. And as I was planning for this episode and writing a little outline, I was searching in my Google Docs the word inner child just to see what other things I had already written in there. And interestingly, I came across this document that I wrote in 2021 for a training that I was creating at the time. So that's 4 years ago at the time. And in the document, I mentioned how inner child work had been a big part of my practice for 2 years before that. So it's been like 7 years in the making, 7 years of doing this work. And so I'm excited to talk about it today. Just before we dive in, I want to share with you a free resource that I created, which is a quiz called Which Anxious Attachment Type Are You? Or Which Anxious Attachment Archetype Are You? And this is not to be confused with which type of attachment style are you. If you are here, you probably already really resonate with being anxious attachment. But what I've seen within the hundreds of women that I've directly supported with anxious attachment is that within the anxious attachment, there are clear sub-patterns. And the sub-patterns show up in different behaviors of anxious attachment, different nervous system responses. So some people are defaulting into a fight response and defensiveness, while other women are defaulting into a freeze or a fawn. And that alone is going to change the trajectory of your healing path immensely and what you need in order to become more secure. So now that I've noticed these patterns, I really want everyone who's on their anxious attachment journey to understand these deeper layers of their own pattern so that you can understand what it means for your nervous system, your coping behaviors, and find resources that are going to support you accordingly. So in my Becoming Secure membership, I have separate curriculums for each of these types, but you need to take the quiz to figure out which type you are. So the quiz link is going to be in the video description, and I highly recommend taking it just for some more customized advice on your anxious attachment healing journey. Don't distract yourself right now. Watch this video. I'll remind you about the quiz at the end. It's like a really easy 12-question multiple choice quiz. So let's talk about what we're here to talk about, which is the inner child. So what actually is the inner child? This is a concept where we start to see that some of our subconscious patterns and layers as sort of frozen in time. So because our beliefs or subconscious responses were formed at a young age, we want to start to see them as having the intellectual capacity and the maturity of a very young child. That could be 6 years old or 2 years old or 3 years old. And when I say subconscious patterns, just to break that down even further, it's very common that we hear the metaphor that from age 0 to 7, we are a sponge. Whatever we are seeing, interpreting, experiencing is landing in our bodies as the only way, as the truth, as the right way. And actually, as children, when we're in these developmental years, our brainwaves are even in a totally different state than they are as adults. And that brainwave that we're in, I think it might be theta, is a very influenceable brainwave to be in because children don't have other context of the world other than what they're experiencing. So it's going to really make an imprint on us as kids. And it's important that our brain is in this brain state so it can take in so much information so we can learn about the world and learn how to speak and talk and walk and be. But what we're also learning in that is who and how we should be in order to get love. And that's where things can get a little bit tricky because we are potentially being raised by parents who are in their own trauma, in their own distraction, in their own projection, in their own chaos, whatever it is, and they simply just might not have the capacity or the resources to meet every need we have as a child. So when we're a child, our main mission is basically to get love, to get attention, to get our needs met. And we will very quickly start to learn and adapt how we think we need to act in order to pull that off. So I was talking to a client the other day, and she was telling me how she has these vivid memories from when she's less than 10 years old, and she was realizing how she could manipulate her stepmom into giving her what she wanted, basically. So she had this conscious understanding that she was learning how to do that. And that makes sense because maybe by age 8, we can start to understand like, oh, there's a pattern here. I can see that if I do this, there's a predictable reaction from the adult. But even younger than that, we are being conditioned in a similar way that kind of manipulates our choices to get the reaction that we want based on how the adults around us respond positively or negatively. Additionally, our nervous system is also being conditioned deeply in these years. So, number one, while you are in your mother's womb, your nervous system is already being preconditioned based on her state and her stress levels. And this is important because if your mother is actually experiencing a high stress environment, then by feeding you, the fetus, this information, it's preparing your body to be birthed into a high stress environment. And if it was the case of famine or war, that's helpful for the baby. But when it's the case of her own perceived stress, her dysregulated nervous system, a toxic relationship or dynamic that she's in, overworking, then yes, it's preparing you for that, but it's also teaching your body that the world is unsafe before you're even able to experience it yourself. Then you are birthed into the world, into an environment, into a home and a family, and based on what's going on there, your nervous system continues to be conditioned. Your nervous system will learn, is a fight response safe for me? Do I get my needs met when I scream and cry and ask for what I want? Or do I get my needs met better when I'm silent and agreeable? Do I get my needs met easier when I self-isolate? Is that where I feel most protected? So now we're starting to learn which survival response is going to make us feel the most safe and get us what we need. And I'm talking like, this is when we're literally an infant, right? So we don't really have context of what is going on. We can't intervene and be like, oh, this is going to mess up my attachment style. Like we have no idea. We're just testing. We're testing crying basically and how well that works. So it's all going on deep in our subconscious and gets locked away to run on autopilot. So now these are the things that drive us into thought patterns and loops and behaviors that at this point as an adult, you probably can see are not ideal for how you want to show up in the world. And this might be the feeling of being really desperate for attention or wanting people to spend more time with you, feeling like you never want to be alone, can show up as victim mentality, need for control, maybe some rigidity, hypervigilance, hyper-independence. It can be a flailing sensation of sort of like, I can't handle anything, I'm just going to collapse here, I want to feel saved. We might feel anxious in situations where we know we shouldn't feel as anxious as we do feel. We can feel like we want to, like we're being attacked constantly. We can seek validation constantly. We can get stuck in sadness. We can get codependent. We can be very closed. We can feel really out of control with our anger. We can override our emotions. And as I say this list, it might sound a little overwhelming, but at the same time, there's something that I've seen that is so freeing for me and my journey, for the women that I've worked with this knowing of like, okay, this isn't me. This is a young part of me that didn't get her needs met, that didn't get the nurturing, the love that and the presence that she needed. And there is something that I can do about it because I know better as an adult. I know I don't want to have this victim mentality or have this codependent tendency, but it's just a part of me and a part of you that's likely very young that is subconsciously driving these behaviors. And again, you can do something about it. So what is the doing that we do about it? As in anything that we want to change, the doing starts with awareness. So that means in this example, having the awareness that this inner child concept is a thing, which you do, remembering that these responses that come through us sometimes are coming through a part of you that is frozen at the maturity of, let's say, literally a 3-year-old. So acknowledging that, acknowledging what the behavior is, how does it show up for you? Where does your inner child come out? Is it in desperate energy? Is it in helplessness? Is it in defensiveness? Is it in control, right? All of these behaviors are just different ways of seeking safety and seeking to get a need met. So first we have the awareness. This is how this behavior shows up for me, and there's a concept of inner child work, and I know that they're linked. Perfect. Level 1. Level 2 is starting to identify what need am I trying to get met here in this response. So if the response is to collapse, to feel helpless, hopeless, like a victim, then chances are that the need that's not being met there is probably some flavor of needing to feel supported, needing to feel held, needing to feel contained, needing to feel validated, needing to feel your own autonomy and ability to make decisions. But when we can address what is the need for you, then you know what type of nurturing your system actually needs in order to come back into safety. And this is where the concept of reparenting comes in, which is hand in hand with the concept of inner child. So for the parts of us that are in their inner child reaction, in the survival response, in the sort of temper tantrum or immature reaction, that part of us needs a present, compassionate, loving adult presence. And that's who you are now. You are an adult that is resourced, that does have a deeper understanding, that does have a connection to yourself, a knowing about the world that your inner child doesn't have. And one of the most unexplainable, intangible, magic parts of this whole thing is that these layers of our psyche sometimes don't have the awareness of what reality actually is, right? They're stuck in this experience of needing to be in a survival response. They're stuck in a loop. They're stuck in fearing of whatever it might be. They're stuck feeling overwhelmed by things that logically shouldn't overwhelm us anymore. So there's this disconnect between what your adult mind knows and what your subconscious is experiencing. So your inner child might literally not understand what your life is because they are so caught up in fears from the past. So what I mean when I say that is that there's like a neural pathway that is not seeing reality because it's just running on a loop. So when we do this work, we connect to the inner child within us and we show her, hey, this is what I have now. This is what is available to us. This is what reality is. And sometimes just doing that through meditation, through journaling, through guided practice, you can unlock and shift so much in your subconscious. It's actually wild. And this is why it's been so profound in my journey, why I bring it in with all of my clients, and also why it's one of the first things you do in the Becoming Secure community membership that I talk about all the time. So that's in there associated with this episode. Lots of the podcast episodes have a guided practice that goes along with them or some journaling prompts that go along with them. So if you go in there for the inner child one, you know that there is a guided somatic practice, and it's one of people's favorite, and it's like the most deep one that happens in the first week of you being in there. So as I said, the second level is identifying the need, right? What is the need not being met here? What missing need is driving this coping behavior? And then the third thing is the reparenting. So that's reparenting yourself, giving it to yourself. So these needs that we uncover could be anything from patience, presence, compassion, holding. And where this gets tricky is that if we have an anxious attachment tendency, we tend, even more than most people, to want our needs to be met from the external world or from someone else. We spend a lot of our time projecting our energy and our attention and our resources for soothing outside of us. We want to be soothed by someone else. We want to be soothed by our parent or like that guy texting us back. And so we don't realize it's this part of us looking for our mother's attention or father's attention without us even realizing that's what we're doing. We're constantly going outside of ourselves. So the self-soothing work, which we talked about in an earlier episode as well, is one of the key tools to feeling secure within yourself. And that means regulating yourself alone. And we can do this in so many different ways. Using guided somatic practice is obviously one of my favorite ways. So ultimately, 50% at least of the guided somatic practices in the membership are about self-soothing and self-resourcing. And doing that is part of reparenting. It's identifying the need and then giving it to yourself in whatever way makes sense. The need might also be play, and you might find in this process or going through the guided somatic practice that your inner child wants to dance or paint or go to tennis lessons or rest or listen to music or cook. All of these things can actually be so simple and actually really easy, but chances are we have another part of us that's resisting giving it to ourselves. I can't rest. I don't have time to rest. I don't have time to play. That's silly. That's childish. And what gets missed there is that is the pathway. The need is the pathway to unlocking what you actually want. So let's say you're trying to build a business and you're procrastinating. You might not realize that it's connected, but if your inner child's needs were met, she would stop throwing up that procrastination as a coping mechanism because she feels unsafe. The safety of our inner child affects all areas of our life, all areas of our growth, our ability to set boundaries, because if our inner child feels unsafe, she's going to be the one that is afraid of rejection in setting a boundary, right? So part of you knows, I'm going to be okay if I communicate this. This is important to me. Even if they get mad, even if they say no, I'm going to be okay. Part of you knows. But then you go into the moment or a conversation and your throat closes and you start to have fear, and maybe you feel like you're a bad person for setting this boundary. And that's because the inner child, who doesn't have the same knowing or maturity as you do, is feeling afraid. It would also show up in any sort of attempt to stretch your edge or get out of your comfort zone. That requires us to do something different and new. And the part that is resisting us doing that is so often our inner child or our inner teenager. It's the same concept. The way that you would connect with that part would be the same. The conversation you have might be different. But this is also going to this work is going to affect your ability to expand your window of tolerance. So if you've watched all these videos, you'll have heard me explain the window of tolerance once, but our window of tolerance is our ability to experience real or perceived stress without tipping into a survival response. So how much stimulation, aloneness, stress before your body goes, oh God, I can't handle this, I'm going to shut down, or gets defensive or wants to get out of here, the fight, the flight, the freeze responses. How much can we keep ourselves regulated before we tip over? And we don't want to have an infinitely huge window of tolerance. We need our survival response to help us gauge for danger and stay alive and see threats in other people. But what happens so often is our window of tolerance is so small that the littlest things trigger us into anxiety or overwhelm or shutdown or fear, however it shows up for you. So in this journey of healing, especially when it comes to the nervous system work, what we're trying to do is expand that window of tolerance and that capacity for stress. And it's our inner child that is gonna be the thing fighting against us in that. So doing the inner child work is finding the parts of us that need extra reassurance to feel safe, that need the soothing, that need more understanding of what reality is, what your reality is right now, so that we can relax back into our safety. Wherever you find that for yourself, where is the anchor here that allows you to stay with yourself in the face of things that used to trigger you? And that means touching the parts of you that do feel capable, that do know that you are able to withstand this thing. So as I said, it's like We experience something triggering. Your adult mind goes, I should not be that worked up about this thing, yet I feel very, very worked up. And so what we want to teach our body how to do is anchor in the knowing and bring that basically like adult mature knowing into the body, so that the body is not being run by the old subconscious inner child that doesn't understand. And when it comes to reparenting, the final piece that's really, really important is to consider that healing and getting this willingness from this part of you to change and to trust you is going to come from your consistent presence and compassion and love with yourself. It's not going to come with super high expectations and pressure to do something different, or an inner critic, or impatience. That's just going to make your inner child close down or pull away or get even more upset. And so you really need to think, how would I have to communicate to a 9-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 1-year-old to hold them in this, to help them feel safe again? And because it is these less matured parts of us that are generally holding us back from showing up in the world in the way that we want to, and feeling secure, feeling confident or open or loving or warm, or feel just safe with people, or creative, or able to try new things and take risks. It is the not yet matured parts of us that are in the survival response that are resisting. But now you're going through this process, you've identified what it is, you've identified the need, you're getting the need met for yourself with presence and compassion, and then you will need to take a different action. So that's when we choose to move towards the thing that we've thus far maybe held back from, or protected ourselves from, and it's going to feel a little vulnerable. There's a little risk there when we take down the walls that the inner child or the survival response has put up. So we're asking our inner child to trust us and let us lead, and there's a bit of vulnerability there. So something to consider is that after you try something different, which might be communicating different, asking for what you want, trying something new, whatever your edge is, reminder to take care of yourself, to come back and tend to this part of you that maybe feels a little bit exposed, who may want to take the boundary back, or feels like, oh my God, I want to curl up, and like, I don't know if that's okay. Sometimes we call it a vulnerability hangover, which is exactly what it sounds like, kind of like this, oh God, that was a lot on my nervous system, but it's okay. That's exactly what it is, to shift and to create safety with an edge in our nervous system. We're not just gonna heal overnight and all of a sudden be this fearlessly confident person. We have to do the self-soothing work, take care of what you need, anticipate what you need in the future, be clear on your boundaries, keep checking in with this inner child until she really grows up, basically, which she will. So the final piece is to really take care of yourself on this journey, knowing that a lot of nurturing and parenting work essentially takes time, and it takes potentially months of working with your inner child. And as I said, this has been in my life for 7 years and was definitely more intensive in the beginning. But even now, when stuff still continues to come up, of course, I'm checking in with these like really sensitive, really tender parts of me and figuring out, okay, what do we need here? Why does this feel like too much? And it always comes down to something that's pretty simple. Parts of us that don't feel seen or that want rest. And your work is to create safety within your own body by honoring these needs or creating an agreement around the needs, which is a subtle piece of discernment that we're actually not going to talk about right now. So that is my teaching for you today on the inner child and what it is and how to work with her and heal her. As I said, there's a beautiful, deep, most likely emotional guided healing practice in the Becoming Secure membership. So the link for that is in the video description. You can join for free, actually for 7 days right now at the time of this recording. Not sure that will always be there, but the practice will invite you to connect to this part of you and help you to kind of take your mind offline and just trust the process and be guided. And it can be really emotional to meet these parts of ourselves, but these inner child layers within us. Again, it might be a teenage part of you or, 10-year-old or 2-year-old. they always have so much information for us. They have things that they want us to hear and things that they want to share with us and be seen in, and definitely needs. And it's just so beautiful and powerful every time. I don't have a better word other than powerful. It's such a useful tool. So even if you were to go into the membership and only use this tool and just use it like 4 times over the course of a month, I trust that would already be deeply profound. And you already know there's so many other tools and guided healing practices in there around anxiety and your power and so many other things. So it's a wealth of tools. And of course, you have direct access to me as well. And I'm always in discussion with the women about what's coming up and what's happening in your process. And we have live calls, Q&A calls for coaching. So it's honestly just getting more valuable week by week. And I do workshops every month. Like there's so much in there. As I said, reminding you about that quiz. So the which anxious attachment type are you is in the video description. I think it's worth taking. As I said, it's like 12 really easy multiple choice questions. It's going to give you an archetypal result, which could be the sensitive soul. It might be the common collected overthinker. Maybe you are the affection enthusiast, or maybe you are the distant dreamer. And maybe just from hearing the titles, you kind of have a sense. But then once you get your quiz result, you're also going to get a little 12-minute teaching about this specific archetype and what that means for you in terms of anxious attachment, your healing journey, some more insights about your nervous system that would be different from the other types. And then within the Becoming Secure community, there's a full curriculum that you can go through that is based on your type. So again, that link is in the video description below. If this video was helpful for you, please click the thumbs up button so that I know that you're listening and it's landing and it's helping and it feels supported.